America. It is a hope that someday every people and every nation of the world will know the blessings of liberty. And it's the hope of millions all around the world. In the last few years, I've spoken at Westminster to the Mother of Parliaments, at Versailles, where French kings and world leaders have made war and peace. I've been to the Vatican in Rome, the Imperial Palace in Japan, and the ancient city of Beijing. I've seen the beaches of Normandy and stood again with those boys of Pointe du Hoc who long ago scaled the heights. And with, at that time, Lisa Zanetta Hen, who was at Omaha Beach for the father she loved. The father who had once dreamed of seeing again the place where he and so many brave others had landed on D-Day. But he had died before he could make that trip. And she made it for him. And Dad, she'd said, I'll always be proud. And I've seen the successors to these brave men. The young Americans in uniform all over the world. Young Americans like you here tonight, who man the mighty USS Kennedy and the Iowa and the other ships of the line. I can assure you, you out there who are listening, that these young people are like their fathers and their grandfathers, just as willing, just as brave, and we can be just as proud. But our prayer tonight is that the call for their courage will never come, and that it's important for us, too, to be brave. Not so much the bravery of the battlefield. I mean,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Friday. Wow, it's Friday. What a fast week. Things have gone by very quickly. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine, and it's Johnny Cash Friday, and so we're always excited about that. And for those of you who don't know, Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and the events of the day and the week. Now, the Johnny Cash music goes out on our terrestrial radio stations, but not online. And we have some presidential speeches. Joe's trying to line that out. I think they were just listening to Ronald Reagan's 1986 Independence Day address just a second ago. But there's more out there in the library. Hey, and by the way, if you've got a presidential speech that you want to hear on Friday on the internet side of things, let us know what it is. We'd love to put it up there. Did I mention the phone number yet? 870-275-9799. Well, that's it. Okay, so Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, on the Brett Kavanaugh vote. Quote, I don't think you can delay it any longer, he said. This is a Breitbart News article. President Donald Trump signaled Friday that he was growing impatient with the delays over the vote to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh. I think this accuser here, folks, looks like she is eventually going to testify, but now, according to the most recent reports, it will not be Monday. I think that's the deadline that Chuck Grassley put out there. They're now saying, no, it's not going to be Monday, but it might be Thursday. Huh. Say what you want to. Whether it was a political ploy or not, or a legitimate accusation, it certainly has delayed things. And that appears to be at least one of the goals, which was a last-minute, 11th hour Hail Mary. Throw this allegation out there that we've had since the summer. Joe, can you throw this article up for him? Also, I think you also had President Trump go. He went on Sean Hannity's show last night because there's this huge Nevada rally in Las Vegas. They say the lines were out the door. There's the Breitbart article, and then do we have an audio clip of what President Trump said last night? Listen to this.
I think it's a very sad situation. He's an outstanding person. And frankly, Sean, to see what's going on is just very, very sad. You say, why didn't somebody call the FBI 36 years ago? I mean, you could also say, when did this all happen? What's going on? To take a man like this and besmirch. Now, with that being said, let her have her say, and let's see how it all works out. But I don't think you can delay it any longer. They've delayed it a week already. And
you've been very accommodating.
I have been accommodating. I say let her say what she has to say, and let's see how it all comes out. But they've delayed it a week, and they have to get on with it.
All right, stop.
Mr. President,
a lot of this is because of in October. I think the Supreme Court's next term starts, in October, and so I think that has something to do with them wanting to get Judge Brett Kavanaugh, through this confirmation process. It also has to do with the election. There's no question that there are political optics on both sides here. There is a new theory, though, that is fascinating to me. I mean, this really is fascinating. There is a new theory that the Kavanaugh accuser almost basically had a doppelganger. I mean, this headline here asked the question, was Kavanaugh accuser almost raped by his doppelganger? A new theory emerges. Now, there's a series of tweets, by a guy with the last name of Whelan, and he is actually, I think, a former law clerk, a former clerk for Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, the late Antonin Scalia. Ed is his first name. There it is. So Ed Whelan, who's the former clerk, and now he is the president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, which is a conservative think tank. Ed Whelan has a theory that seems to be pretty well researched. It is circumstantial, but my goodness, it's extremely interesting. Look at these two photos here. These are yearbook photos of a guy named Brett Kavanaugh. You obviously know who that is on the left, and then a guy named Chris Garrett on the right. And they look a little similar, certainly have similar haircuts from back in the day. And so earlier this week, according to Zero Hedge, Whelan tweeted, by 1 week from today, I expect that Judge Kavanaugh will have been clearly vindicated on this matter. Specifically, I expect that compelling evidence will show his categorical denial to be truthful. There will be no cloud over him. Of course, the update to that is Christine Blasey Ford, the accuser, says that this theory is bogus. There's zero chance that she would confuse the two men. But here's the theory regardless, fascinating to me. Dr. Ford may well have been the victim of a severe sexual assault, as the theory goes, by someone 36 years ago. Her allegations are so vague as to such basic matters as when and where that it is impossible for Judge Kavanaugh to prove his innocence. But there are compelling reasons to believe his categorical denial. Let's look at the reasons. According to Ford's letter, the assault occurred in a suburban Maryland area home at a gathering that included me and 4 others. Her Washington Post account adds that the house was not far from the Columbia Country Club. The 4 others that she and her lawyer have identified are Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, P.J. Smith, and a female classmate of Ford's. None of the 4 lived in the vicinity of the Columbia Country Club. Kavanaugh's home was 3.6 miles away. Smith's was 4.3 miles. Judge's was 10 miles. Isn't it ridiculous that we're even getting it? I'm just saying. I mean, this is some murder, she wrote investigation here. And then the female classmates, 7 miles. Here is a map of the homes in relation to Columbia Country Club. You see that photo there. Okay. Here is a house that is barely a half a mile from the Columbia Country Club. You see the street address there. And here is the house's floor plan, the main floor and upstairs. The floor plan corresponds closely to Ford's description of the house where the gathering took place. Here's the short stairwell. You see that, part of a U-shaped staircase with a landing running up from the foyer next to the living room. Right at the top of the stairs is a door leading to a bedroom. This matches Ford's account of the location of the bedroom where she was pushed into, according to her account. By her account, when she escaped from the bedroom, she ran across to a hallway bathroom. The floor plan shows that the hallway bathroom is across the hall from the bedroom. She says the gathering took place in a small family room. You can see the family room in the upper left of the floor plan. Someone leaving the house down the stairs and out the front door wouldn't be seen from the family room. Who lived in this house? A man by the name of Chris Garrett, who's a Georgetown prep classmate, who's now been dragged into this, by the way. And he is a friend and football teammate of Brett Kavanaugh. Garrett was good friends with Mark Judge, the guy who's been named as being at this, alleged event. Their friendship appears to have continued long after graduation, as this 2012 Facebook exchange shows. Folks who knew both Kavanaugh and Garrett in high school have commented on how much they resembled each other in appearance. Here are Kavanaugh and Garrett in their senior yearbook photos. And scrolling down, here are Kavanaugh and Garrett now. They do favor each other. My goodness. If you're at a gathering of four others in someone's home, you'd ordinarily think that the four others include the host who lives there. But right now, none of them actually lived there, the way the story goes. And that host would be the person least likely to act like a guest and most likely to use private areas of the house. Kavanaugh categorically denies being at the gathering and committing the assault. Beyond his countless character witnesses from then and now, Judge and Smith have informed the Senate Judiciary Committee that they recalled no such gathering at which Kavanaugh was present. The female classmate has not been heard from. To be clear, Whelan writes, I had no idea if anything did or didn't happen in that bedroom at the top of the stairs, and I therefore do not state, imply, or insinuate that Garrett or anyone else committed the sexual assault that Ford alleges. Further, if Ford is now mistakenly remembering Garrett to be Kavanaugh, I offer no view whether that mistaken resemblance dates from the gathering or developed at some point in the intervening years. It is regrettable that private citizens are being drawn into this, but that is the product of Senator Feinstein's shockingly shoddy handling of the whole matter. If the matter had been handled as it should have been, the committee would have investigated the matter over the summer and resolved it privately to everyone's satisfaction without the smearing of Kavanaugh and the dragging of the names of others into the public eye. Bottom line, I believe that a fair assessment of the evidence powerfully supports Judge Kavanaugh's categorical denial. Now, in response to the theory, the New York Times columnist here, Ross Doubt That, is that his name? Ross Doubt That. Doubt it. There's not two T's, there's just one. Tweeted, I don't know Brett Kavanaugh, which has made it easier for me than for conservatives closer to the man to believe he might be guilty. I do know Ed Whelan, which makes me assume there's more reason to believe the doppelganger theory than just what he just tweeted. We'll see. Anyway, is that not a fascinating theory, though? I mean, that's incredible. If it's true, this guy did a lot of research here. Basically figuring, hey, look, they say that it took place near the Columbia Country Club. Well, none of the four people that are, alleged to be at this gathering lived near the country club. But this house was near the country club, and it belonged to this guy who looks a whole lot like Brett Kavanaugh. You got to wonder this Chris Garrett, the other guy, they're saying that's the doppelganger. You got to wonder, he's probably living under a rock someplace right now. My goodness, this is ridiculous. So why is this all happening? I will just refer you to my monologue yesterday morning. It's Roe versus Wade, folks. This is why. I mean, whether it happened or not, it's about Roe versus Wade. They are absolutely the left. They know that the balance of power in the court is about to be shifted, where there's going to be potentially Supreme Court justices, enough of them that believe that abortion, Roe versus Wade, is not a constitutional right. You don't have a constitutional right to take the life of your child. And that is what they're worried about. And I think that's why they are kicking and screaming here. And, allegations aside or not, they have been kicking and screaming this whole time, right? I mean, you've seen the left's protests. But before any of this even happened, right, before we got to this point where there was a last-minute allegation that, that Brett Kavanaugh, forced himself on a woman, and traumatized her, and, she got away and ran out of the house or whatever. That's the allegation. Before any of that, the left was kicking and screaming, and, they were getting arrested. There was the protests and the hearings, and then you had Cory Booker and his Spartacus moment, and when that failed miserably, they tried to say, what do they try to say? First of all, they tried to say that Brett Kavanaugh was a racist, and they have some secret email, and I've got to reveal it. And, of course, then the email actually proves that Brett Kavanaugh is not a racist and has some problems with, the certain types of profiling that are going on, that you want to make sure that we don't do those things. And so it actually proves the opposite of what they were trying. So the racist allegation doesn't stick. Okay, so now he's a rapist, or he's an attempted rapist. Oh, no. He's a sexual predator is what they're saying now. They called Clarence Thomas a sexual predator here recently. We've already got a sexual predator on the Supreme Court. A sexual predator? Really? My goodness. I think the definition of the word sexual predator is getting extremely broad. Don't you, Joe? Am I the only one? I think the definition of the phrase sexual predator is getting broader and broader and broader. Pretty soon, men are just not even going to be able to talk to women. That appears to be where we're headed. Phone number is 870-275-9799. It's Johnny Cash Friday, and we're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We got a little bit more. We got a lot of news to get to. Folks, at the top of the hour, I'm telling you, I have a video from the Republican Party of Arkansas that made my head explode yesterday. I was triggered yesterday. I'll tell you, later this show, I'm going to tell you why I got triggered yesterday. I mean, severely triggered. You're not going to believe it. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Back in a minute.
The bravery of brotherhood. All through our history, our presidents and leaders have spoken of national unity and warned us that the real obstacle to moving forward the boundaries of freedom, the only permanent danger to the hope that is America, comes from within. It's easy enough to dismiss this as a kind of familiar exhortation. Yet the truth is that even two of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, once learned this lesson late in life. They'd worked so closely together in Philadelphia for independence. But once that was gained and a government was formed, something called partisan politics began to get in the way. After a bitter and divisive campaign, Jefferson defeated Adams for the presidency in 1800. And the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams slipped away to Boston, disappointed, broken-hearted, and bitter. For years, their estrangement lasted. But then, when both had retired, Jefferson at 68 to Monticello and Adams at 76 to Quincy, they began through their letters to speak again to each other. Letters that discussed almost every conceivable subject: gardening, horseback riding, even sneezing as a cure for hiccups, but other subjects as well: the loss of loved ones, the mystery of grief and sorrow, the importance of religion, and of course, the last thoughts, the final hopes of two old men, two great patriarchs for the country that they had helped to found and loved so deeply. It carries me back, Jefferson wrote about correspondence with his co-signer of the Declaration of Independence, to the times when, beset with difficulties and dangers, we were fellow laborers in the same cause, struggling for what is most valuable to man, his right to self-government, laboring always at the same oar, with some wave ever ahead threatening to overwhelm us, and yet passing harmless, we rode through the storm with heart and hand. It was their last gift to us, this lesson in brotherhood, in tolerance for each other, this insight into America's strength as a nation. And when both died on the same day, within hours of each other, that date was July 4th, 50 years exactly after that first gift to us, the Declaration of Independence. My fellow Americans, it falls to us to keep faith with them and all the great Americans of our past. Believe me, if there's one impression I carry with me after the privilege of holding for 5.5 years the office held by Adams, Jefferson, and Lincoln, it is this, that the things that unite us, America's past of which we're so proud, our hopes and aspirations for the future of the world and this much-loved country, these things far outweigh what little divides us. So tonight, we are reaffirmed that Jew and Gentile, we are one nation under God. The black and white, we are one nation indivisible. That Republican and Democrat, we are all Americans. Tonight, with heart and hand, through whatever trial and travail, we pledge ourselves to each other and to the cause of human freedom, a cause that has given light to this land and hope to the world. My fellow Americans, we're known around the world as a confident and a happy people. Tonight, there's much to celebrate and many blessings to be grateful for. So while it's good to talk about serious things, it's just as important and just as American to have some fun. Now, let's have some fun. Let the celebration begin.
A light to the world, a beacon held high. Beckoning from a harbor. To the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, reaching across the world to all whose hearts know the meaning of her life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program today. Thanks so much for being with us. Anyway, we'll see what happens over the weekend. I'm sure the Sunday shows, there's a 100% chance somebody on one of these Sunday shows is going to say something so stupid about this whole situation. But my goodness. Here's a question. Here's a question. It's just, I mean, and you tell me what the answer is. What is disqualifying? What is disqualifying? What do you have to do when you're 17 years old that somebody finds out about? I mean, I'm just saying if it's true, that would then disqualify, 35 years later, after you've been a judge and everything, like what do you have to do for really any promotion, for any achievement in life. Can we agree on a list? Like, is there a list of things that we can agree on? Like, and what I just want to try. I want to get something that, holds up. Because, even with the Clarence Thomas allegations, those allegations weren't from when he was 17 years old in high school. I mean, back when Clarence Thomas was being confirmed, if they had come up with an allegation that Clarence Thomas was, harassing women or harassing Anita Hill, that was what the allegation was. I mean, that allegation was something that was at least in his professional life, not when he was 17 years old. You know what I'm saying? I would like to know. I just would like to, get some sort of, some sort of measuring tool, so where we can know. Okay, you were 16 and you, I don't know, you break the speed limit when you were 16 years old. Listen, I know I'm not. I would just like to know what it is because 20 years from now that may be. I mean, Who knows 20 years from now if you can just throw an allegation out there and the allegation is now disqualifying. I don't know. Are we on the quest for perfection? I mean, are we on the quest to find perfect people? That's a whole nother question. I mean, that doesn't mean, if it's true, it's concerning. That's right. You're right. I mean, but anyway, we got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, distinguished members of Congress, honored guests, and fellow citizens. Only a month ago, I was your guest in this historic building, and I pledged to you my cooperation in doing what is right for this nation that we all love so much. I'm here tonight to reaffirm that pledge and to ask that we share in restoring the promise that is offered to every citizen by this, the last best hope of man on earth. All of us are aware of the punishing inflation which has, for the first time in 60 years, held to double-digit figures for 2 years in a row. Interest rates have reached absurd levels of more than 20% and over 15% for those who would borrow to buy a home. All across this land, one can see newly built homes standing vacant, unsold, because of mortgage interest rates. Almost 8 million Americans are out of work. These are people who want to be productive. But as the months go by, despair dominates their lives. The threats of layoff and unemployment hang over other millions, and all who work are frustrated by their inability to keep up with inflation. One worker in a Midwest city put it to me this way. He said, "I'm bringing home more dollars than I ever believed I could possibly earn, but I seem to be getting worse off." And he is. Not only have hourly earnings of the American worker, after adjusting for inflation, declined 5% over the past 5 years, but in these 5 years, federal personal taxes for the average family have increased 67%. We can no longer procrastinate and hope that things will get better. They will not. Unless we act forcefully, and now, the economy will get worse. Can we who man the ship of state deny it is somewhat out of control? Our national debt is approaching $1 trillion. A few weeks ago, I called such a figure, $1 trillion, incomprehensible. And I've been trying ever since to think of a way to illustrate how big $1 trillion really is. And the best I could come up with is that if you had a stack of $1,000 bills in your hand, only 4 inches high, you'd be a millionaire. $1 trillion would be a stack of $1,000 bills 67 miles high. The interest on the public debt this year, we know, will be over $90 billion. And unless we change the proposed spending for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, we'll add another almost $80 billion to the debt. Adding to our troubles is a mass of regulations imposed on the shopkeeper, the farmer, the craftsman, professionals, and major industry that is estimated to add $100 billion to the price of the things we buy, and it reduces our ability to produce. The rate of increase in American productivity, once one of the highest in the world, is among the lowest of all major industrial nations. Indeed, it has actually declined in the last 3 years. Now, I've painted a pretty grim picture, but I think I've painted it accurately. It is within our power to change this picture, and we can act with hope. There's nothing wrong with our internal strengths. There has been no breakdown of the human, technological, and natural resources upon which the economy is built. Based on this confidence in a system which has never failed us, but which we have failed through a lack of confidence and sometimes through a belief that we could fine-tune the economy and get a tune to our liking, I am proposing a comprehensive 4-point program. Now let me outline in detail some of the principal parts of this program. You'll each be provided with a completely detailed copy of the entire program. This plan is aimed at reducing the growth in government spending and taxing, reforming and eliminating regulations which are unnecessary and unproductive or counterproductive, and encouraging a consistent monetary policy aimed at maintaining the value of the currency. If enacted in full, this program can help America create 13 million new jobs, nearly 3 million more than we would have without these measures. It will also help us to gain control of inflation. It's important to note that we're only reducing the rate of increase in taxing and spending. We are not attempting to cut either spending or taxing levels below that which we presently have. This plan will get our economy moving again, productivity growth, and thus create the jobs that our people must have. And I'm asking that you join me in reducing direct federal spending.
I'm going to break in here and welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. You can call or text 870-275-9799. Broadcasting over at facebook.com/Conduit News, as well as our Conduit News YouTube page, if you'd like. Yeah, a few of your Facebook comments, first of all. I mean, this is some pretty funny stuff here. Let's see. John writes, it's being reported now that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has accused Abraham Lincoln of improper conduct back in 1862. John has some jokes. It's pretty funny. That's why Abraham Lincoln nominated her, right? To keep her quiet. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's the old Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Abraham Lincoln 1862 scandal of, sexual misconduct. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, exactly. It was different times back then. Different times, different standards. Yeah, nobody ever knew about it because you didn't talk about it. You can bring this stuff up in public, right? You didn't do that kind of thing. Yeah, and other people are saying, when you do something when you're 17 as a juvenile, aren't those records sealed? Yeah, that's a good point too. Like it's not admissible in court or something, or usually juvenile records are sealed, is what Gene says, and somebody else mentioned that as well in the Facebook comments, which is interesting. But anyway, I think that if you listen to what President Trump said last night, look, let her have her say. She needs to be heard. Okay, needs to be heard. And then so does Judge Kavanaugh. Let Judge Kavanaugh address this as well. And just kind of see what happens. Let's face your accuser and let's hear from the accused and let's move forward because Supreme Court term starts here in a couple of days. The new term does. So what do you say, right? It would be nice. It would be nice to have some 5-4 decisions instead of some 4-4 decisions. What do you say? Where they rely on the liberal judges and stuff below the Supreme Court and their rulings. Not all of them, but you know what I'm saying. Hey, in the meantime, guess what? The bigger news this week was really that President Trump wants to declassify certain pages of the FISA document that are going to, well, I mean, what are they going to do? What are we going to really, when it all finally happens, and why, by the way, is it taking the Justice Department so long? This shouldn't be hard. I heard some reports that the Justice Department of the FBI, even though they've been given an order from the President of the United States, they're going to talk to the President and suggest some redactions, even though he says he doesn't want any redactions of names like James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr. Well, Louis Gohmert. Louis Gohmert had some pretty good stuff to say. Listen to what Louis Gohmert said on Lou Dobbs' show. By the way, Lou Dobbs. Haven't talked about him in a while. Man, Lou Dobbs has had his finger on the pulse of American populism for the last 20 years. Right on with illegal immigration. I mean, you know, he was talking about illegal immigration and the crisis at the border before it was ever a big thing to talk about. Lou Dobbs was. And that was back when he had his CNN show. Now, let's just stop right there. Can you believe that Lou Dobbs used to have a show on CNN every weeknight? Every weeknight, Lou Dobbs had a show on CNN. It was either, it might have been CNN Headline News, or I can't remember if it was CNN or CNN Headline. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just telling you, that if that doesn't tell you, I mean, CNN was liberal back then, and they had Lou Dobbs who was talking about the border almost every single night. And, you know, now look where they are. I mean, it's just they've gotten even worse. All right, so Louis Gohmert talking about the reason that the Democrats have now written to the FBI and the Justice Department and have said, do not comply with the president's order to declassify the FISA pages. You got to talk to us first, which is preposterous because the FBI and DOJ do not answer to Congress when it comes to, they have no authority to stop the executive agencies from doing what the executive branch is ordering them to do, but yet they're trying to. So we got a video here, Joe. Go ahead and hit play on this. This is Lou Dobbs and Louis Gohmert. Listen to what he says on the real reason they don't want to declassify the FISA documents. Oh, yeah. This is the Media Research Center, or CNN
The trouble
News. Yeah.
that I see right now is whoever prepared the declassification order did not put a date by which it had to be declassified and made public, and therefore he still has enough deep staters in the Justice Department. Of course, Jeff Sessions recused himself, so you got Rosenstein. Well, every time we have seen something be unredacted, it wasn't about sources and methods. We want to protect those, but every time it has been self-serving to protect the people who have been violating federal regulations, violating protocol of the Justice Department, or violating the law. And so it's kind of calling wolf one too many times to be saying, gee, this is terrible. No, it's transparency, and the American people need to see just how bad the DOJ was weaponized and was utilized.
Turning to these texts, we've heard from Devin Nunes. We have heard from others, including Chris Farrell of the Judicial Watch, that there is no reason why there should be any delay on the documents, the 20 pages from the FISA court application for surveillance. There should be no, in their judgment, reason for delay on producing these unredacted texts. But the truth is, we've seen over the past year and a half nothing but stonewalling by the Justice Department, the FBI, the intelligence community is on a whole nother level. What do you expect to happen? How soon do you expect the president to have these documents produced by the agencies and the Department of Justice? It's hard to say. There was a reason for delay a year and a half ago because it takes a little time. But since then, the reason for delay has been to protect the guilty. You know, the names are being redacted, the things are being redacted to protect the guilty. So that's the reason they're being redacted. That's the reason they're being slow to uncover these things. And don't forget ever for a moment who's in.
The names have been redacted. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. The names have been redacted to protect the guilty. Wow. That's Republican Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert. That's crazy. So the stuff that's in here, I mean, is it really as big as everyone is saying it is? Is it going to be conclusive? That's what I want to know. You know what I mean? I've been covering the news, for a while now, and of course we've never had anything like this. And I know everybody always says that, but when have you ever had the kind of scandals going on in our own government, and it really, I think that you have. I mean, you had Watergate and you've had some other things, but you've never had a sustained period where the media is picking a side, and the side is, we don't want the government to look bad here. Yeah, they might have done something wrong, or they might have used their power in a way that is illegal, but we agree with them ideologically, and so we don't want to. We'd rather, Donald Trump is probably a KGB agent. But I've never seen anything like this, where you have not one rogue official, but a cabal of officials who are loyal to something else other than the United States government, or what they believe. I mean, they are willing. The ends justify the means. They're willing to take steps outside of the law to thwart the American people, to thwart Donald Trump, or the democratic process. Because why? Donald Trump's going to clean house because Donald Trump's going to put in policies you disagree with. And so you take these these elite, what appear to be, if what Louis Gohmert is saying is true, and what Devin Nunes is saying is true, and what others are saying is true, I mean, are we talking about potential prosecution for some of these names that are redacted in the FISA document? Is that what we're talking about? Because that would be huge if you're talking about, at some point, a James Comey prosecution. Like, you're going to actually charge them with a crime? That's what I want to know. How damning is the information? How bad is it really going to get? I mean, part of me is a little skeptical because I'm like, is anything ever going to, is something going to actually materialize? Are we going to have like a hard black and white, okay, this is what you did, you broke the law, and this is your punishment for it? Or is it just going to be, you see, the thing is, if there aren't charges, then the media is not going to have anything to report. What I mean by that is the media is going to ignore this. Whatever it is, I just think the media is not going to tell the American people the truth about it, because it's, in order for them to do that, the media is going to essentially have to admit they've been lying for a year and a half about Donald Trump being a Russian spy. I mean, they're going to, and I don't see them doing that. I really don't. The corporate media, man, the corporate media has got to, they obviously lost the 2016 election. It was a huge blow to them and their ego of being able to control the way we think. But they're certainly, they're back with a vengeance. There's no question about that. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Silicon Valley, have you seen this story? This is just confirming what we already know, but speaking of the media, and when I say the media now, I guess you have to lump in the Silicon Valley companies like Google, Facebook, how they are colluding based on one solid political ideology, which is basically all things conservative bad, everything liberal, progressive, class warfare / Marxist is good. They apparently, according to this report, they thought about tweaking their search algorithm back during the beginning of the Trump presidency, when he instituted his travel ban, his common sense travel ban. And it says here that the Wall Street Journal is reporting that 2 tech reporters exposed an incident where Google employees considered actively biasing the company's search algorithm to favor news sources that would offer the perspective that Trump's then newly issued travel ban was unconstitutional, illegal, and dangerous, while also servicing links to resource and information that would allow users to contribute to the ACLU and other organizations working against the ban, while also providing resources for people impacted by the ban. Folks, when you have the amount of power that Google has, the question is, why would they do? The question is, why wouldn't you do it? Because they believe in their cause. And the amount of power that they have is, well, a lot of people just don't want to admit it. I mean, some of our politicians just want to keep, taking the campaign donations as well. There's that factor as well as to how much regulation is that the answer? I'm hesitant to say that it is. Are antitrust laws going to be applied here at some point? I don't know. But it is, it's certainly, again, I don't think it's certainly doesn't seem like something that we have faced before. Looking at what the internet has become, really, in just even in the last 10 years, nobody could really understand and project the internet of tomorrow and what it has done, how it's changed our lives and how we interact with one another, how we get our news. I understand now that you have the former Google CEO, Schmidt. He is now saying that in 10 years, there's going to be 2 different internets. Have you heard about this? He's saying there will be 2 different internets. There will be a China internet and an America internet, essentially. It just so happens that Google's helping China work on a censored Google, a Google search engine that's, censored. And, of course, there are Google employees, rightfully so, that are outraged. Why would you do this? Why would you help China censor and control their own population? And those same Google employees are working for a company that is perfectly happy to censor conservative points of view. It's a little hypocritical, don't you think? The phone number is 870-275-9799. It's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be back here in just a moment.
By $41.4 billion in fiscal year 1982, along with another and this goes along with another $7.7 billion in user fees and off-budget savings for a total of $49.1 billion. And this will still allow an increase of $40.8 billion over 1981 spending. Now, I know that exaggerated and inaccurate stories about these cuts have disturbed many people, particularly those dependent on grant and benefit programs for their basic needs. Some of you have heard from constituents I know, afraid that Social Security checks, for example, were going to be taken away from them. Well, I regret the fear that these unfounded stories have caused, and I welcome this opportunity to set things straight. We will continue to fulfill the obligations that spring from our national conscience. Those who, through no fault of their own, must depend on the rest of us, the poverty-stricken, the disabled, the elderly, all those with true need, can rest assured that the social safety net of programs they depend on are exempt from any cuts. The full retirement benefits of the more than 31 million Social Security recipients will be continued along with an annual cost of living increase. Medicare will not be cut, nor will supplemental income for the blind, the aged, and the disabled, and funding will continue for veterans' pensions. School breakfasts and lunches for the children of low-income families will continue, as will nutrition and other special services for the aging. There will be no cut in Project Head Start or summer youth jobs. All in all, nearly $216 billion worth of programs providing help for tens of millions of Americans will be fully funded. But government will not
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Continue to subsidize individuals or particular business interests where real need cannot be demonstrated. And while we will reduce some subsidies to regional and local governments, we will at the same time convert a number of categorical grant programs into block grants to reduce wasteful administrative overhead and to give local governments and states more flexibility and control. We call for an end in duplication to federal programs and reform of those which are not cost effective. Now already, some have protested that there must be no reduction in aid to schools. Well, let me point out that federal aid to education amounts to only 8% of the total educational funding. And for this 8%, the federal government has insisted on tremendously disproportionate share of control over our schools. Whatever reductions we've proposed in that 8% will amount to very little in the total cost of education. They will, however, restore more authority to states and local school districts. Historically, the American people have supported, by voluntary contributions, more artistic and cultural activities than all the other countries in the world put together. I wholeheartedly support this approach and believe that Americans will continue their generosity. Therefore, I'm proposing a savings of $85 million in the federal subsidies now going to the arts and humanities. There are a number of subsidies to business and industry that I believe are unnecessary. Not because the activities being subsidized aren't of value, but because the marketplace contains incentives enough to warrant continuing these activities without a government subsidy. One such subsidy is the Department of Energy's Synthetic Fuels Program. We will continue support of research leading to development of new technologies and more independence from foreign oil. But we can save at least $3.2 billion by leaving to private industry the building of plants to make liquid or gas fuels from coal. We're asking that another major industry, business subsidy I should say, the Export-Import Bank Loan Authority be reduced by 1/3 in 1982. We're doing this because the primary beneficiaries of taxpayer funds in this case are the exporting companies themselves, most of them profitable corporations. This brings me to a number of other lending programs in which government makes low-interest loans, some of them at an interest rate as low as 2%. What has not been very well understood is that the Treasury Department has no money of its own to lend. It has to go into the private capital market and borrow the money. So in this time of excessive interest rates, the government finds itself borrowing at an interest rate several times as high as the interest it gets back from those it lends the money to. And this difference, of course, is paid by your constituents, the taxpayers. They get hit again if they try to borrow, because government borrowing contributes to raising all interest rates.
All right,
By
folks. All right, welcome back to the program. Listen, in order for Johnny Cash Friday to actually happen, eventually you got to get to the verse that Johnny sings. That's my goal. We were just listening to the Highwaymen, and it's it's a bunch of it's a bunch of stars there, and Johnny doesn't come into like the last verse, and so I was like, why did I didn't remember it took so long, So I was sitting there waiting, like, okay, who is that guy? Okay, all right, I think Johnny's next. No, that's not Johnny's voice. Okay, and then I was like, okay, yeah, they gave him the last verse for obvious reasons. Anyway, okay, we're going to wrap things up here on this first hour. We got another hour coming your way next. Hope you're having a great morning. Just relax. We're going to get to the news. Hey, I'm going to recap some Ecclesia. You remember the Ecclesia College kickback scandal? It's big example of corruption here in Arkansas. I'm going to recap that when we come back. The Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette did an editorial that I don't know. It's just a perspective that I disagree with. Is it the environment or is it the men? Is it both? What do we need to learn here from the swamp that is the Marble Palace of Little Rock, Arkansas? I'll have more on that when we come back.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
The Economic Development Administration, we can save hundreds of millions of dollars in 1982 and billions more over the next few years. There's a lack of consistent and convincing evidence that EDA and its regional commissions have been effective in creating new jobs. They have been effective in creating an array of planners, grantsmen, and professional middlemen. We believe we can do better just by the expansion of the economy and the job creation which will come from our economic program. The food stamp program will be restored to its original purpose, to assist those without resources to purchase sufficient nutritional food. We will, however, save $1.8 billion in fiscal year 1982 by removing from eligibility those who are not in real need or who are abusing the program. But even with this reduction, the program will be budgeted for more than $10 billion. We will tighten welfare and give more attention to outside sources of income when determining the amount of welfare an individual is allowed. This, plus strong and effective work requirements, will save $520 million in the next year. I stated a moment ago our intention to keep the school breakfast and lunch programs for those in true need. But by cutting back on meals for children of families who can afford to pay, the savings will be $1.6 billion in fiscal year 1982. Now let me just touch on a few other areas which are typical of the kind of reductions we've included in this economic package. The Trade Adjustment Assistance Program provides benefits for workers who are unemployed when foreign imports reduce the market for various American products, causing shutdown of plants and layoff of workers. The purpose is to help these workers find jobs in growing sectors of our economy. There's nothing wrong with that. But because these benefits are paid out on top of normal unemployment benefits, we wind up paying greater benefits to those who lose their jobs because of foreign competition than we do to their friends and neighbors who are laid off due to domestic competition. Anyone must agree that this is unfair. Putting these two programs on the same footing will save $1.15 billion in just 1 year. Earlier, I made mention of changing categorical grants to states and local governments into block grants. Now, we know, of course, that the categorical grant programs burden local and state governments with a mass of federal regulations and federal paperwork. Ineffective targeting, wasteful administrative overhead, all can be eliminated by shifting the resources and decision-making authority to local and state government. This will also consolidate programs which are scattered throughout the federal bureaucracy, bringing government closer to the people and saving $23.9 billion over the next 5 years. Our program for economic renewal deals with a number of programs which at present are not cost-effective. An example is Medicaid. Right now, Washington provides the states with unlimited matching payments for their expenditures. At the same time, we here in Washington pretty much dictate how the states are going to manage those programs. We want to put a cap on how much the federal government will contribute, but at the same time allow the states much more flexibility in managing and structuring the programs. I know from our experience in California that such flexibility could have led to far more cost-effective reforms. Now, this will bring a savings of $1 billion next year. The space program has been and is important to America, and we plan to continue it. We believe, however, that a reordering of priorities to focus on the most important and cost-effective NASA programs can result in a savings of $250,000. Now, coming down from space to the mailbox, the Postal Service has been consistently unable to live within its operating budget. It is still dependent on large federal subsidies. We propose reducing those subsidies by $632 million in 1982 to press the Postal Service into becoming more effective. And in subsequent years, the savings will continue to add up. The Economic Regulatory Administration and the Department of Energy has programs to force companies to convert to specific fuels.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. And it is Johnny Cash Friday, by the way. We're going to get to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day and the week. Got a few more great songs coming up this hour. And I think what is the online audience? Online audience not getting the Johnny Cash treatment, but they're getting President Ronald Reagan's 1980, is that 81? 81 State of the Union Address. Pretty sure it said 81, Joe. All right, so I got an interesting hour coming your way. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to recap the entire Ecclesia College scandal, and I got to push back a little bit against this Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette editorial, because I just disagree with some of their assessments. But then later in this hour, I'm going to tell you, I got triggered yesterday. I'm telling you, the Republican Party of Arkansas triggered me yesterday, verily. And I have a feeling it might trigger this audience as well. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you what triggered me later in this hour, so stay tuned for that, okay? All right, so what do we have here? Let's start off with this piece here, Northwest Arkansas editorial. This was back on the 16th, so a few days ago. It's the one that is titled Legislative Reckoning. Sentencings seek to protect public trust. So they start off with the concept here that President Donald Trump, part of his success is that he promised that if you elected him president, that he would drain the swamp. We're all very familiar with this phrase, drain the swamp. Matter of fact, we have it, we run it on our bumpers when we come back from break and stuff, that we're determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock here at Conduit News. So they basically say that when Donald Trump was talking about draining the swamp, that Arkansans had no idea that some of their own state lawmakers were bathing in the swamp. Now, that is not necessarily true. There were plenty of Arkansans that knew what was going on. It just wasn't as many people that is know now, right? For example, we know that back when Donald Trump actually came to Arkansas for the Republican Party of Arkansas Reagan Day dinner down in Hot Springs, right? They had him in, and it was kind of a joke. Honestly, he had just announced he was running for president, or no, I'm sorry, he hadn't just announced, but he was. I guess it was we were the Republican Party of Arkansas was looking for speakers, and he's the first one that said yes, and he said yes, and we were like, oh, okay, and so he came, and I'm sure. I think it was a really good night financially for the Republican Party of Arkansas, because a lot of people wanted to see Donald Trump, right? But I think the establishment, which is kind of like, okay, yeah, Donald Trump's running for president, that's never going to happen, right? And there were people in that room that night, I promise you, that knew very well that the Arkansas at Little Rock Marble Palace was a swamp. We now know that Jim Hendren knew that John Woods was crooked. I mean, the guy asked for a bribe from Jim Hendren, and Jim Hendren didn't cooperate with the FBI. I mean, we know who these people are. There's a ton of Arkansans that know and knew at the time that the FBI was investigating. I mean, everybody heard rumors. There were people. This is what I'd love for the mainstream media to report. I mean, there were rumors on Capitol. At the Capitol down there for years that somebody was wearing a wire and getting people and recording people, and the FBI was investigating and everything else. So when Donald Trump was talking about draining the swamp back in 2016, there were plenty of people in Arkansas that knew what the situation was in here. And I know that's maybe kind of being petty here. There's just way more people that know now because people are going to jail, okay, because we have the sentencing. But listen to what the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette editorial then goes on to say. Quote, real swamps consist of vibrant ecosystems of plant and animal life. They're beautiful in their own way. They serve as water purifiers and support a wide range of life. What? Are you kidding me? You guys are supposed to speak truth to power. Oh, my gosh. They just, boy, that Trump, he's such a dummy. Drain the swamp. Does he not know that swamps are beautiful? What an idiot. What a dummy. Does he not know that swamps are water purifiers and support a wide range of life? So ridiculous. They go on. We have thankfully learned that swamps come with ecological benefits and aren't something to eliminate. I don't know. I think I'm being triggered all over again from something completely different. Okay, so that right there just sets this whole thing up. This editorial, right? Okay. When we're looking up what the ecological benefits of swamps actually are. I'm sorry, I think swamps are gross. I think swamps are gross. That's what I think. Anyway. They do say still, swamps harbor some nasty, dangerous critters that it's best for us humans to avoid. Okay, thankfully. So the analogy isn't completely bad. That's good. Thank you. Goes on, so we do understand the value of Trump's imagery. Truth be told, though, it's the politicians who have lately who lately have given swamps an undeserved reputation. It's not the swamp that's to blame for the less desirable qualities of political animals. It's our politicians. If our politicians are in a swamp, it's them who are fouling the waters. Government isn't a swamp, they write, but its powers prove an enticing lure to human predators who view it as a place to satisfy their baser instincts. Okay, all right, our whiteboard this week says power corrupts. I can get you there, but the swamp itself is what's bad, though. It is the swamp that enables and sustains the swamp creature. If it's not for the swamp creature has nowhere to thrive. And that is the problem. And, the swamp is the water, the water in the swamp is essentially our tax dollars. That's the way I see this thing. And the only way to drain the swamp, truly, and maybe there are other ways, but eventually you have to cut off the tributaries that are flooding the swamp with our money. Because if the money dries up, then there's less of it for them to steal in Washington, D.C. and in Little Rock. If we give them less money, if the people of Arkansas get to keep more of their money, there's less of it for them to steal. And the swamp is drained. And then when the swamp is drained, you can see more of the creatures that live, lurk, and thrive underneath the cover of government, underneath the cover of darkness. They go on. So I'm just kind of, first of all, I think this editorial is interesting to say the least. I'm trying to be nice here, but I will say it's not just the people. It is the environment. It is government. Government is a necessary evil. George Washington said that government is a necessary evil. Okay, and you have to recognize that. You have to understand what you're dealing with. These guys have the power, right? These guys have the power to ruin our lives because what they vote on becomes a law that we have to live under or we go to jail. That's essentially the power we're talking about here. The power of governing results in the curtailing of our freedoms or the expanding of our freedoms or the preservation of our freedoms. It's a very key concept that must be realized by those who serve us, and it is not being realized because these guys compromise and they violate their own platform. And then when guys like me call them out and they fail to hold themselves to their own standards, people lose confidence in everything else. And instead, you try to cover up, and I'm going to get to the cover up here in a moment because this is what triggered me. But when you fail to meet your own standards, instead of trying to correct them, but in the name of power, you can't, and instead you try to cover them up. You try to say, well, the other side's lying about my record. No. Yeah, these people aren't real conservatives because they're not always, they don't just believe that if you have a red T-shirt on, then you're good. We've seen what happens. I mean, the incoming president pro temp of the Senate, Jim Hendren, who failed to cooperate with the FBI, compared Conduit to terrorists a couple of weeks ago. This article goes on. In the last 2 weeks, Arkansans have seen in grim detail the consequences those political predators face and should when they venture into the swamp. U.S. District Court Judge Timothy L. Brooks used his authority not just to punish the guilty, but to also set a clear example for those who in the future might entertain thoughts of abusing the public's trust. And this is true. And I would refer you from this Gazette article. You can go to conduitnews.com and check out the sentencing article on John Woods, where he was very thorough and talked about the depravity of John Wood's heart. It's very clear to me, based on the reporting of multiple outlets, that Judge Tim Brooks did not believe that John Woods was remorseful. In essence, that he really thought he still hadn't done anything wrong, or I don't know, maybe he thought the Republican establishment was going to walk through the door of that courtroom any second and somehow get him out of all this. I don't know. But the fact is, the judge sentenced him to 18 years because of the severity of his crimes and the violation of public trust. Okay? So, and I have something else to say about that here in a minute. I'm about to launch into this right now. I can't wait to tell you guys what triggered me yesterday. We got to finish this first. I'm trying to stay on task here. It keeps going. I think we're pretty much done with this. Let's see. What do they say at the end here? Really and truly, my whole point in bringing this Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette article to your attention was just to push back on the idea that this was just a couple of guys who were up to no good, right? This was a product of the system, right? And there are more people. This is not just a few guys. This is the whole system is this way, okay? So to recap, now I'm back on track. I mean, let's just think about what actually happened here. And you tell me if it's just a couple of guys, who came up with this scheme, or you tell me if this is an entire problem, like an institutional-wide problem, okay? All right, so you have John Woods, who is, a state senator. And we now know that John Woods not only had this scheme going with Ecclesia College, but he had other schemes. And the judge actually said in the case he was thinking 2, 3, 5, 6 years down the road and planned out which pieces of legislation were going to bring him the most money and had it basically like a series. Now, then I'm going to do this, then next year I'm going to do this, next year I'm going to do this, and work it all out, right? You have this Christian college, Ecclesia College, that is not doing well financially. And so John Woods and Orrin Paris and Randall Shelton and Micah Neal, they say, essentially this was an attempt to make a private university public, but nobody's ever going to find out about it, right? So we're going to use General Improvement Fund money. This is a General Improvement Fund money is a system that is no longer in play. They basically are giving all the money now to the governor. But it was found unconstitutional, saying you can't do this. You can't have the legislators individually giving away this money. It's unconstitutional. And the Supreme Court agreed. But then something happened. The legislature decided to launder the money through something that's called planning and development districts. And that was a workaround from the Supreme Court ruling. So as long as they launder the money through the planning and development districts, the legislators still get to award based on a wink and a nod of an email saying, I want the money to go here, and then I'm going to show up and deliver the check. And essentially nothing changed. They decided to launder the money. Laundering the money. The state of Arkansas in the General Assembly passed this law that essentially changed General Improvement Fund distribution by basically creating a middleman and laundering the money. Should we be surprised? Should we be surprised when legislators then basically mimic that scheme and get the money for themselves? You see, this is not just a John Woods, Micah Neal, Orrin Paris, Randall Shelton, Jake Files, Jeremy Hutchinson, Michael Lamoureux, Joe Walsh, Hank Wilkins, Eddie Cooper, Milton Russell, Rusty Cranford problem. Try to say that again. I don't think I could. It's not just this is an entire institutional problem where we have people essentially copying what they're seeing the government itself condone. But the government does it, it's okay. Now, the Supreme Court has since found the planning and development district laundering scheme to be unconstitutional as well, which is the real reason why this thing is now over. I mean, if you really want to know the that the whole environment is corrupt, all you need to know is that they went around the Supreme Court ruling initially to try to keep the gravy train going. And all the legislators were all on board with it. Now, I'm sure there could be good reasons. You say, I really needed that money because my local fire department needed it, and now that's not there. Well, the Constitution says what it says. You can't do that. You can't fund local projects like this. So, come up with some other workaround that's way more transparent where everybody actually votes on this stuff. How about that? But anyway, so the Ecclesia scandal was, we're going to give money to this private college, and then the private college is going to give money to the lobbying consulting firm, and then the lobbying consulting firm is going to give the kickbacks back to the legislators who initiated the nod, wink, wink emails that got the planning and development districts to give Ecclesia College the money. Not only that, they were getting their legislator friends to give money to Ecclesia College, who probably didn't know about the schemes, but maybe some of them did. And then, of course, you get the money that goes to buy the land deal. And then you have State Representative, Bob Ballinger, for example. He gave money to Ecclesia College and then did the legal work on the land deal. And there are people that think there's nothing wrong with that. At the very least, it should have been disclosed, wouldn't you think? No. This is not just 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10 people involved. It is not just them. It is the very nature of government that allows men like this to thrive, to carve out the financial niche for themselves. And so that's why I would just disagree with the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette a little, not entirely here, but especially swamps are actually beautiful places with vibrant ecosystems. It's ridiculous. Okay, we're gonna go to break, folks. It's Johnny Cash Friday, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
It has the authority to administer a gas rationing plan, and prior to decontrol, it ran the oil price control program. With these and other regulations gone, we can save several hundreds of millions of dollars over the next few years. I'm sure there's one department you've been waiting for me to mention, the Department of Defense. It's the only department in our entire program that will actually be increased over the present budgeted figure. But even here, there was no exemption. The Department of Defense came up with a number of cuts which reduced the budget increase needed to restore our military balance. These measures will save $2.9 billion in 1982 outlays, and by 1986 a total of $28.2 billion will have been saved, or perhaps I should say will have been made available for the necessary things that we must do. The aim will be to provide the most effective defense for the lowest possible cost. I believe that my duty as president requires that I recommend increases in defense spending over the coming years. I know that you're all aware, but I think it bears saying again that since 1970, the Soviet Union has invested $300 billion more in its military forces than we have. As a result of its massive military buildup, the Soviets have made a significant numerical advantage in strategic nuclear delivery systems, tactical aircraft, submarines, artillery, and anti-aircraft defense. To allow this imbalance to continue is a threat to our national security. Notwithstanding our economic straits, making the financial changes beginning now is far less costly than waiting and having to attempt a crash program several years from now. We remain committed to the goal of arms limitation through negotiation. I hope we can persuade our adversaries to come to realistic, balanced, and verifiable agreements. But as we negotiate, our security must be fully protected by a balanced and realistic defense program. Now let me say a word here about the general problem of waste and fraud in the federal government. One government estimate indicated that fraud alone may account for anywhere from 1 to 10%, as much as $25 billion of federal expenditures for social programs.
All right, so in other news out of Arkansas, there were talks on the Arkansas Senate video streaming. We talked about this yesterday. Well, they had some more meetings about it, and apparently they're kind of stalled right now because they can't really decide on if the Arkansas Senate is going to start streaming and archiving their meetings. How exactly is that going to work? Rightfully so, Senator Linda Collins Smith stood up and said, listen, we all need microphones at our desks. I'm really glad she said that. And you need to put that into the budget if you're going to do this. Because, see, right now the Arkansas Senate is streaming audio only. They don't archive it, but when the Senate is in session, they will stream audio only in the chamber. But guess what? You can't hear anything. You can't hear anything. Do you know why you can't hear anything? Because they only have one microphone up at the up at the front, up at the well or whatever. And everything that's said into there you can hear on the stream. But most of the time these senators stand up and ask questions, and they have microphones, but sometimes the microphones don't even work. So if you're going to do a streaming service for the Senate, I don't even care about camera angles, really. I know they talked about that, and that's, beneficial in some way. But if you're going to stream and record and archive, you got to be able to record these guys on record, which means they all need individual microphones, just like the House has. I don't know what the problem is. Just do what the House does. Go look at their equipment, humble yourselves, and go to the lower chamber and say, hey, how did you guys do this? And just do the exact same thing. Right? You would think that's what they would do. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment. I'm going to tell you what triggered me here in a moment.
If the tax dollars that are wasted or mismanaged are added to this fraud total, the staggering dimensions of this problem begin to emerge. The Office of Management and Budget is now putting together an interagency task force to attack waste and fraud. We're also planning to appoint as inspectors general highly trained professionals who will spare no effort to do this job. No administration can promise to immediately stop a trend that has grown in recent years as quickly as government expenditures themselves. But let me say this: waste and fraud in the federal government is exactly what I've called it before: an unrelenting national scandal, a scandal we're bound and determined to do something about. Marching in lockstep with the whole program of reductions in spending is the equally important program of reduced tax rates. Both are essential if we're to have economic recovery. It's time to create new jobs, to build and rebuild industry, and to give the American people room to do what they do best. And that can only be done with a tax program which provides incentive to increase productivity for both workers and industry. Our proposal is for a 10% across-the-board cut every year for 3 years in the tax rates for all individual income taxpayers, make a total cut in tax rates of 30%. This 3-year reduction will also apply to the tax on unearned income, leading toward an eventual elimination of the present differential between the tax on earned and unearned income. Now, I would have hoped that we could be retroactive with this. But as it stands, the effective starting date for these 10% personal income tax rate reductions will call for as of July 1st of this year. Again, let me remind you that while this 30% reduction will leave the taxpayers with $500 billion more in their pockets over the next 5 years, it's actually only a reduction in the tax increase already built into the system. Unlike some past quote-unquote tax reforms, this is not merely a shift of wealth between different sets of taxpayers. This proposal for an equal reduction in everyone's tax rates will expand our national prosperity, enlarge national incomes, and increase opportunities for all Americans. Some will argue, I know, that reducing tax rates now will be inflationary. A solid body of economic experts does not agree. And tax cuts adopted over the past 3/4 of a century indicate these economic experts are right. They will not be inflationary. I've had advice that in 1985, our real production in goods and services will grow by 20% and be $300 billion higher than it is today. The average worker's wage will rise in real purchasing power 8%. And this is in after-tax dollars. And this, of course, is predicated on a complete program of tax cuts and spending reductions being implemented. The other part of the tax package is aimed directly at providing business and industry with the capital needed to modernize and engage in more research and development. This will involve an increase in depreciation allowances. And this part of our tax proposal will be retroactive to January 1st. The present depreciation system is obsolete, needlessly complex, and economically counterproductive. Very simply, it bases the depreciation of plant, machinery, and vehicles and tools on their original cost with no recognition of how inflation has increased their replacement cost. We're proposing a much shorter write-off time than is presently allowed. A 5-year write-off for machinery, 3 years for vehicles and trucks, and a 10-year write-off for plant. In fiscal year 1992, under this plan, business would acquire nearly $10 billion for investment. By 1985, the figure would be nearly $45 billion. These changes are essential to provide the new investment which is needed to create millions of new jobs between now and 1985, and to make America competitive once again in the world market. Now, these won't be make-work jobs. They're productive jobs, jobs with a future. I'm well aware that there are many other desirable and needed tax changes, such as indexing the income tax brackets to protect taxpayers.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The phone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Okay, what triggered me yesterday? Well, I was triggered by the Republican Party of Arkansas. Without further ado, let's just get right into it, because I got a lot to say about this. This video was circulating. I found it on social media. It was posted by State Representative Aaron Pilkington, and it's essentially a Republican Party of Arkansas video bragging about their leadership, which is fine. Let me just say right now, that's fine, okay? The Republican Party of Arkansas is obviously, just like the Democrat Party, they're going to put out things that they can brag about. Now, I could go through each one of these points, and I could pick them apart. You know, the tax cuts that really just make you, okay, you can buy a Big Mac that you couldn't buy last year, or the military retirement tax cut that was a tax increase bill. It was, the offsets and everything else. Okay. I can let all that go. That's their messaging. That's essentially Asa Hutchinson's messaging and everything else. Okay, fine. It is. Let's see if you can figure out what triggered me. Go.
In 2014, you, the voters of Arkansas, voted for conservative government for the first time in state history as Republicans led the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. Here's what happened. The economy improved. Over 70,000 new jobs came to Arkansas. Our wage growth was among the best in the nation, and our employment numbers set a new state record. Our tax cuts put more money in your pockets. Our middle-class tax cut was also the best in state history. Thanks to eliminating the tax on retirement benefits, Arkansas is now a magnet for military retirees. We have a new era of transparency and accountability, beginning with your vote with the 2014 ethics law. Now, bad behavior is identified, caught, and prosecuted.
Stop.
Our education is improving for the first time.
Did you catch that? They are bragging about catching unethical legislators in the wake of some of the worst corruption in the history of the state. And they are claiming that their ethics law is responsible for identifying and bringing these unethical people to justice. They fail to mention, by the way, that the, quote, ethics law they're referring to was, number one, written by convicted felon John Woods, who's going to jail for 18 years for being unethical. Number two is that it wasn't an ethics bill because it unethically lied to the people of Arkansas so that they could stay in power longer and make more money by increasing their salaries. You can see why I was a little triggered here. Number three, it was sponsored in the House by a Democrat, Warwick Sabin. When I saw that, can you freeze frame it? Can you go back and actually freeze frame it on the part where they're bragging about the ethics law with a little newspaper graphic? By the way, I think this is the voice of State Representative Carlton Wing, former TV broadcast anchor. He's got a great voice. Legislature increases penalties for violating public trust. I mean, I have to tell you, folks, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like just the brazenness here. This is so brazen. This has no regard. The Republican Party of Arkansas here is trying to take absolutely no responsibility for all of these legislators, or most of them, a vast majority of these legislators going to prison being Republican and being part of this whole cabal and this whole system. They're trying to distance themselves. I don't know if there's any greater, more perfect definition of irony than trying to distance yourself from the corruption within your own party and with the own political class by citing a, quote, ethics law that was written by a guy who's now going to jail for 18 years. I don't know if there has ever been a more ironic thing in the world. You know what I think of myself? I think, okay, do you remember when Senator Jim Hendren said that we've got to be very careful now that we have the majority because, when we were the minority, it didn't really matter what we voted for because it wasn't going to pass. But now it's a different situation down here today, and we've got a real chance, a real opportunity to do things, to pass legislation, to do things. But we also have an opportunity, he said, to screw it completely up. Well, congratulations, Waterboy. You've screwed it completely up. I don't know. This is either first-class stupidity. This is either first-class stupidity, or it is just as wrong as you can be. How do you, and again, we have some consistency here. The consistency here is John Woods got 18 years because he wasn't remorseful. Putting this in a propaganda video is essentially spitting in the face of every Arkansan who's concerned about their government and concerned about the people who've been in charge this whole time, who are still somehow lifted up as credible leaders. You're spitting in the face of people who are concerned about our own government by saying that you want to distance yourself from your weak spot. I get it. But it's not time to do that yet because it is what it is. It's in the headlines every single day. The corruption is in the headlines every single day, and you're trying to distance yourself from it. It's just like the same articles that say, "Hey, this is Asa's Republican Party now," but you can't hold him responsible for any of the stuff that's been going on. Not this nephew or this nephew refusing to cooperate with the FBI after he was asked to bribe a public official. And yet, do you see what's going on here? I mean, this is about the soul of the Republican Party of Arkansas. That's what this is about. This is incredible. I think it should trigger everybody out there, really. And when I saw that, I thought, my goodness, how many people have no idea the law they're referencing? How many people are still asleep? And you don't know this 2014 law that they're referencing is about it was written by a guy who's going to jail for 18 years. And that's how you distance yourself from corruption? That's insane. It's absolutely insane. I mean, this is lying to the people. This is like I know this reference may be lost on a lot of you, older people out there, but to the younger audience, it's like the Ministry of Magic in the Harry Potter films. I mean, it is literally, as a matter of fact, it's the newspaper article is actually fitting the graphic here on the video. If you see it, this is straight up. I mean, this is straight up deceit. This is it's a cover up. They're just trying to ignore the fact that all these guys are Republicans who are going down for this. They're trying to ignore the fact that the leadership in power today knew about it. That Asa Hutchinson knew John Woods was a scoundrel and supported him for re-election anyway and threw him a fundraiser. That Jim Hendren knew that John Woods wanted a bribe and then didn't wear a wire and cooperate with the FBI, and then the cabal and establishment supported him anyway for re-election because they thought you would never find out about what just came out in these court documents. They thought you would never find out. We also have the opportunity to screw it completely up and get the blame for it. Well, this is now their effort to escape the blame. And you have a willing mainstream media, for the most part, that is, they write good articles here and there, but they should be banging down these guys' doors, constantly hounding them about what's going on. Has there been any legitimate discussion in the mainstream press about whether or not Governor Asa Hutchinson's nephew, Jim Hendren, should continue to be the president pro temp of the Senate after the fact of him not cooperating with the FBI when John Woods asked him, for a $10,000 bribe? And instead he said, no, I just want to run my race. Now, wait a second. I mean, is there any mainstream media outlet? I know you guys don't like conservatism. A lot of you don't, right? You don't like limited government ideas or goals. Those are, I want to measurably reduce the size of government. I understand you may not like it, but is there something to be said about Asa Hutchinson and the leadership of the Republican Party constantly protecting those like Jake Files when they refused to call for his resignation for some reason? Going after people like Linda Collins Smith and Brian King who actually ran ethics legislation? I mean, you even leave some of that out of your reporting. Is it not at least appropriate to maybe ask, or maybe point out the hypocrisy of, now that everybody knows how bad it is, Jim Hendren, the governor's nephew, is now going to try to create new ethics laws and a new ethics committee, but he didn't file an ethics complaint against John Woods when he should have. And the rest of them didn't file an ethics complaint when they knew who was really clearly down there not serving the best interest of their constituents and violating their oath of office. No. You would be considered a mean person if you did something like that. This goes back to my first point in the monologue I did in the first hour about how, no, this isn't just one or two bad actors or 5 or 10. This is the entire environment is a problem here. We should be asking the tough questions. And instead, who approved this? I don't know who approved this video from the Republican Party of Arkansas. But again, this is spitting in the face. This is bad. This looks so bad. I was talking to some Republicans about this yesterday after I was triggered by this ad, and they couldn't believe it. I mean, I know the Marble Palace bubble is real, but is it? I mean, you're on another planet, man. You're on another planet. If you think that's a good idea, you're on another planet. And I was trying to say, okay, either it's really stupid or it's evil. It's like got to be one or the other, because I don't see how there's middle ground here when you put out when you try to You're trying to deceive people and say that you're above the corruption, but you're citing a law that was a corrupt law in the first place, and the guy who did it is going to jail for 18 years. So there's either somebody here who doesn't listen to this program and has no idea of the recent political history surrounding Arkansas and how we got to this point with all of our legislators going to jail, or you are intentionally deceiving people in such a brazen way that you don't care. I mean, power corrupts is right. We were right on the money with this whiteboard this week. After that, show that photo again. Actually, play it again. Back it up just a little bit and let people listen to what the RPA put out. This is insane.
With the 2014 ethics law, now bad behavior is identified, caught, and prosecuted. Our education is improving for the first time in a generation.
It's insane. That is absolutely insane. I just have a text message I gotta read you guys. Somebody sent me a quote here. A friend, John Steinbeck, said that power does not corrupt, fear corrupts. Perhaps the fear of a loss of power. The fear of a loss of power. I don't know. That's a good quote though. Power corrupts though, and the Republican Party, they have massive supermajority. They have almost a supermajority in the Senate, a supermajority in the House, Republican governor. And it appears to me, as much as I agree with the Republican platform, the actual platform, what it says, it appears to me that the Republican Party of Arkansas just thinks that they can say whatever they want to say, and people are just going to vote for Republican. And I guess that's true. I guess that's exactly what's going to happen, you know? But this is a colossal mistake. I mean, this should be on the front page for the next week in the Arkansas section. That this video was put out, and they're trying to distance themselves from the corruption and all these Republicans going to jail by citing a law that was written by John Woods, who's going to jail. You have no shame. You have no shame, or you are incredibly, incredibly stupid and you just made a mistake, which is really a hard. Well, they're both terrible. Take your pick. You'd want neither of those options. But it's hard to believe that it's not intentional. I don't know how somebody could be that stupid to make to format it like that. Anyway. Bob on Facebook writes, all this sounds like a bad novel. Yeah, it does, but it's real life. Let me know what you think. I didn't quite get as triggered up as I got yesterday. I was really triggered yesterday when I saw that. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be back. Johnny Cash Friday.
Against inflation, the unjust discrimination against married couples if both are working and earning, tuition tax credits, the unfairness of the inheritance tax, especially to the family-owned farm and the family-owned business, and a number of others. But our program for economic recovery is so urgently needed to begin to bring down inflation that I'm asking you to act on this plan first and with great urgency. And then I pledge I will join with you in seeking these additional tax changes at the earliest date possible. American society experienced a virtual explosion in government regulation during the past decade. Between 1970 and 1979, expenditures for the major regulatory agencies quadrupled. The number of pages published annually in the Federal Register nearly tripled. And the number of pages in the Code of Federal Regulations increased by nearly 2/3. The result has been higher prices, higher unemployment, and lower productivity growth. Overregulation causes small and independent businessmen and women, as well as large businesses, to defer or terminate plans for expansion, and since they're responsible for most of the new jobs, those new jobs just aren't created. Now, we have no intention of dismantling the regulatory agencies, especially those necessary to protect the environment and assure the public health and safety. However, we must come to grips with inefficient and burdensome regulations, eliminate those we can, and reform the others. I have asked Vice President Bush to head a cabinet-level task force on regulatory relief. Second, I asked each member of my cabinet to postpone the effective dates of the hundreds of new regulations.
To defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your 7th Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the 7th Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Against inflation, the unjust discrimination against married couples if both are working and earning, tuition tax credits, the unfairness of the inheritance tax, especially to the family-owned farm and the family-owned business, and a number of others. But our program for economic recovery is so urgently needed to begin to bring down inflation that I'm asking you to act on this plan first and with great urgency. And then I pledge I will join with you in seeking these additional tax changes at the earliest date possible. American society experienced a virtual explosion in government regulation during the past decade. Between 1970 and 1979, expenditures for the major regulatory agencies quadrupled. The number of pages published annually in the Federal Register nearly tripled, and the number of pages in the Code of Federal Regulations increased by nearly 2/3. The result has been higher prices, higher unemployment, and lower productivity growth. Overregulation causes small and independent businessmen and women, as well as large businesses, to defer or terminate plans for expansion, and since they're responsible for most of the new jobs, those new jobs just aren't created. Now, we have no intention of dismantling the regulatory agencies, especially those necessary to protect the environment and assure the public health and safety. However, we must come to grips with inefficient and burdensome regulations, eliminate those we can, and reform the others. I have asked Vice President Bush to head a cabinet-level task force on regulatory relief. Second, I asked each member of my cabinet to postpone the effective dates of the hundreds of new regulations which have not yet been implemented. Third, in coordination with the task force, many of the agency heads have already taken prompt action to review and rescind existing burdensome regulations. And finally, just yesterday, I signed an executive order that for the first time provides for effective and coordinated management of the regulatory process. Much has been accomplished, but it's only a beginning. We will eliminate those regulations that are unproductive and unnecessary by executive order where possible, and cooperate fully with you on those that require legislation. The final aspect of our plan requires a national monetary policy which does not allow money growth to increase consistently faster than the growth of goods and services. In order to curb inflation, we need to slow the growth in our money supply. Now, we fully recognize the independence of the Federal Reserve System. We'll do nothing to interfere with or undermine that independence. We will consult regularly with the Federal Reserve Board on all aspects of our economic program, and will vigorously pursue budget policies that'll make their job easier in reducing monetary growth. A successful program to achieve stable and moderate growth patterns in the money supply will keep both inflation and interest rates down and restore vigor to our financial institutions and markets. This, then, is our proposal, America's New Beginning, a program for economic recovery. I don't want it to be simply the plan of my administration. I'm here tonight to ask.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us. As we wrap things up, I want to remind you over at Conduit News, you can get this broadcast and others like it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Conduit News. Click the little bell to receive notifications. Amy on Facebook writes, Paul's rants are cathartic for me because he's my voice and the voice of reason in an unreasonable world. I appreciate that. Kind words, Amy. Sometimes they're cathartic for me. It was one of the reasons I decided to do talk radio. Because it is personal therapy sometimes to get things off of your chest. But other times, yeah, I can get really frustrated. We're going to continue exposing the corruption and exposing the double standards. And I just hope some people in the Republican Party are listening and are going to say something about this ad and what they did with this ethics situation. Because it is intentionally deceptive, in my opinion. Back in a minute.